talking about there's a reason. There's a reason for what's happening. There's a reason why certain things have not worked and are not going to work. And if you could just elaborate a little bit on that before we get into closing statements.
Right. Again, going back to framing. The displaced people that were displaced originally as Jewish people began to settle that area again in around 1900, and especially accelerated in the 30s, and then concluding at the end of World War II with the formation of the Israeli state. All the people that were originally displaced, what's left of those people, that's who's in these occupied territories right now, point number one. So many of these people have been displaced. That is the fundamental starting point in which those people are going to frame their current situation. Not, that there's some rockets coming over the border that started 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. Not that. And then if you're, there are some people in Israeli society, and certainly represented by the actions and attitudes of the current government, who are coming from the standpoint that the right of return to the Jewish people to that place is a divine, God-given right. And if you believe that, then there are certain things that you're willing to do in order to be aligned with that, that there is no argument. There is no, it's an unwinnable argument if that's your core belief. Then
so what are we supposed to do? Just sort of just accept that, and then that's just the way it is, right?
Well, I believe that the kind of political actions that my fellow panelists are talking about are an important part of the puzzle towards moving in the right direction. But I also believe that fundamentally a different idea has to emerge. And I think that it's always...
How'd they run the place before Israel came into existence?
It's always productive to put human, to make the participants human.
Right.
I mean, and so that's why I read the Israeli press, including the right-wing Israeli press. That's why when I see a documentary film like Occupation 101, the first thing I do when I'm done is go read what the Anti-Defamation League has to say about that film, because I really want to understand, what are we dealing with here?
Right.
What are the attitudes? What are the beliefs that have created this system?
Well, there's a lot of groupthink that's going on, and I think that in lieu of what you're saying, Peter, which I totally agree with, is this idea that there is no hope, that we're just going to have to settle for this stuff. And one of the things that I heard Noam Chomsky talk about is the hope that people like ourselves will do exactly what you're doing to change the situation, which is to be informed. Because besides the horror of social media showing me these pictures, I would have automatically assumed that Israel is just fighting for its right to exist one more time. But because of what you said and because of what you've been teaching me, I don't agree with that shit anymore. I don't think that it's just Israel fighting for their right to exist. I think it's Israel controlling these people. And I want to ask something that I don't really know the answer to. Are these people sort of, they have to be in this place? Like, if I lived there, would I be allowed to just leave I mean, I know this may seem ignorant, but I don't really know. Can I leave? If I live in that area, and I say, you know what, I want to leave. I got a passport. I want to go live in Mogadishu or whatever. I can't leave, can I?
You can't, no, especially because Israel and Egypt they have a peace agreement, and so they've been working together more, and they completely border Gaza. So just today there was a story about 70 women and children were trying to take advantage of the ceasefire that was recently brokered. So they were trying to get through the Egyptian border, but the Egyptian guards just went up and stopped them, and so now they're caught in between, they're just kind of very vulnerable position where if rockets started, they'd be right there.
So this is sort of like
it's an open air prison.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So
and not only that, not only is it a prison, but I think it's important for Americans to know, and I think this is a job for people in communications, and I'm interested in participating in it. Americans, we do not know. We do not know how terrible it is in Gaza. We do not know how terrible it is in the West Bank. But I have heard people who grew up under the apartheid system in South Africa, in the ghetto, on the wrong side of the fence, who have been in these places and said, it's worse. It's worse.
I think it's worse for one reason, and I know it's people...
Worse than that.
I believe you, Peter, because I was telling Robert on the phone the other day that I believe that people like me who don't know very much about it, who are starting to see, God, this is really bad. If it's gotten down to my level of understanding how bad it is, then it's got to be really, really bad. Because I've been kind of flying blindly and not really knowing, and just for me to kind of get the information, as ignorant as I am, it's just like, God, that means it must be really bad. Because if John Kerry is caught on Fox with a hot mic saying, you know, strategical my ass, basically, because they were told by the Israelis that these were going to be strategical strikes, pinpoint, and it's like, you know, it's not happening. It really isn't. We're gonna, I'm sorry, this is all the time we have, but we are definitely going to further our discussion in regards to our brothers and sisters in the Gaza and, you know, the Israelis and the Jews who are on the right side of history. There are people, like you said, who refuse to use the hatred and the history of all of this stuff to just be, you know, one-sided. People really believe that Gaza, people, the citizens of Gaza, have the right to exist and have the right to freedom. And just the stories I've been seeing on, you showed me with Amy Goodman about that one guy on Democracy Now! I mean, this guy's watched his dad and brother like bleed to death because an ambulance wasn't allowed to come in, and it's just horrible. We're going to go to closing statements, and this is just for each one of you to kind of air his or her thoughts on, you know, what the final kind of conclusion to our conversation based on what you've seen and what you're going to be trying to do. And of course, ladies first, we'll start with you, Lizzie. What's your closing statement on what you want to convey here?
Well, I do think that, as you said earlier, that the violence and the brutality happening right now is unimaginable for us living here in the United States in Southern California. Like this, we cannot even fathom what's happening, but we can be part of the solution, and I think it's a mistake to think that we should be hopeless about it. And so there are political actions that you could take. There's also, as we said, just simple actions, just telling your friends or sharing something on Facebook, as small as it seems, just raising kind of popular awareness around this and humanizing the issue. That's the most important thing, is remembering that we're not dealing, we can't be partaking in this narrative where there's so much demonization and dehumanization of Palestinians as a collective bloc. That just doesn't happen. That is the type of thinking that underpins, you know, Jim Crow South and the apartheid system in South Africa. That's the type of thinking that made the Holocaust a reality. So I think the most important thing that we can do is just educate ourselves as much as we can, and to share that education with the people around us.
Yeah. Peter, your turn.
I totally agree with that, and you know, I think it's a matter of like changing the conversation, and there are examples in history of people who've been able to do that, such as Gandhi and Mandela and Dr. King, and there are examples in history where something emerged completely off the playing field of the polarized conversation that had been taking place before. And it takes a lot of courage, and the elements that Lizzie was just talking about are things that set the stage more for that to happen. And I think the humanization through social media, I'm not counting on mainstream media anytime soon, because the interests of the government in both Israel and the United States is pretty much what you see in mainstream media. And unfortunately, Americans have a lot of catch up to do about what's really going on in the world, particularly over there because it's going on over there because of the resources that we're giving it. So that makes it a distinct responsibility. At the same time, demonizing Netanyahu, demonizing Zionism, demonizing what's happened so far is not part of the solution. It's just more part of the problem. So I think that it's a combination of a lot of things that has to take place. But I think that there's a 16-year-old girl in Gaza right now who's been posting on Twitter that has been picked up, and people are reading every single day whether she got bombed or not. even though the building next door did last night. That's kind of reminded me of the Diary of Anne Frank.
Yeah.
You know, I would never want to agree with the statement, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah.
And I think that each one of us has to take responsibility for being aware of what's going on, trying to share what we are aware of, and looking for a way to actually be part of the solution.
I totally agree with you. Robert, you're next.
I'm just sitting here thinking about history and how we view certain historical issues, like huge issues of humanitarian issues. If you look at the Holocaust, or if you look at South Africa, or if you looked at slavery, right? History is on the side of the oppressed. And 20, 30 years from now, 50 years, however long it's going to take, history is going to be on the side of the Palestinians.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
That this issue is going to be the largest issue of our generation. And what can the everyday person do? And I think that's what a lot of people are confused about. Like, what can I do as a person against a force so powerful and so inhumane? There's things we can do. And I think Peter and Lizzie articulated those very beautifully. And if there's something that I can add, is do whatever you can. Just do whatever you can. And I think that that we have the power to change this world.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take an MLK or a Nelson Mandela. There were a lot of other people involved, and I think that historically sometimes we tend to focus on a particular individual, but in those cases there was a collection of individuals. It was a collection of people. It was a multitude of people, and we have that power, each and every one of us.
Okay. Now, everybody knows I always gotta have something to say. Listen, I never do this. I've done over like 200 videos on YouTube under the guise of talking shit, and I've worked with children professionally off camera for over 18 years, and my concern, I don't care what they do, but they need to stop killing children. I mean, when we're all done talking. These kids don't have the ability to be a leader or a Martin Luther King Jr. or a Netanyahu or whatever. These are people. These are people. Kids are people too, pun intended. And I just feel lost, a loss for words when someone or some system is systematically set on just making sure that even the kids have to die too. In order for us not to have a solution, we gotta keep killing these kids also. I just think that's ludicrous, it's wrong, and that part has to stop. Regardless of whatever the hell we think has to keep going or not going on, the kids gotta they gotta quit killing these kids. And that's all the time we have now. I want to once again thank our panelists, Peter, Lizzie, and of course Robert D. We'll be seeing him. Go to our website, talkingshit.org, and we'll have more information as things unfold. Thank you.